有咩好介紹？
咖喱嗰啲咯，咖喱食唔食？咖喱牛腩飯啊，咖喱牛羊腩飯。
咪另外嗰啲咧？
嚇？
冇嘅，雜扒飯嗰啲冇嘅。
冇扒㗎，冇扒㗎呢度。
冇錯，哦。
Jeffrey was born in Hong Kong. Though his parents are Indian, he feels more like a Hong Kong local. But because of the colour of his skin, it hasn't been easy for him growing up there. Hong Kong, economic hub and Asia's world city, teeming with the hustle and bustle of its 7 million people. The city's population is majorly Chinese, but it also has large populations of Indonesians and Filipinos, who mostly came to work in Hong Kong as domestic workers. Many Caucasians, Indians, Pakistanis and Nepalese stayed behind after Hong Kong was handed from Britain to China in 1997. But is the city open-minded enough to call itself Asia's world city?
Today things have changed. I believe it's become different, but it's become a lot more subtle. People won't say direct to your face, hey, your brown skin. They would just simply avoid perhaps being in your presence.
There's a very strong hierarchy. I mean, it's Caucasian and Chinese and Indian, and then Pakistani is lower, and Nepali is lower, and the Filipinos are lower, and then further down you got black people, and the Chinese are very sensitive to these ranks.
One NGO asked local Chinese people what came to mind when they thought of ethnic minorities. Their answers varied, but there were still many stereotypes. Chungking Mansions is a microcosm of Hong Kong's ethnic makeup. Some of the Chinese locals who work there have mixed views about their non-Chinese neighbours.
即係有咩事佢哋都互相合作，無論你任何國籍都冇問題咯。你話因為你係中國人或者係印度人，跟住咧就話印度人唔會幫中國人，或者中國人唔會幫印度人，唔會嘅。我哋就有一個義務就幫佢將香港嘅嘢介紹翻俾佢聽。喂，你唔好周圍城啊，有啲嘢你又要守翻香港規矩啊，咩叫 social hygiene 啊？
佢又冇工做，淨係坐喺呢度，個個都夾錢，個個都唔使做嘢，都有錢收。我哋香港人幾時可以攞到政府嗰啲錢？好邋遢，特別印度人咧食埋嗰啲賓同你睇下，成個門口，喂 ，hello， 要跛啊，喂。
多啲外國人或者中國人嚟咧，其實係對我哋有好處咯，係啊，即係話起碼即係香港呢個環境咧，即係吸引到人嚟咧，就唔會話係一個即係會沒落嘅地方咯。
John Ernie, a professor at Lingnan University, has studied ethnicity in Hong Kong in depth.
With the handover in 1997, that is, knowing that the British would be on their way out, and this place would be subsumed under China, people in Hong Kong were very, very keen and very, very busy for the first time in their history, right, to look at themselves and their ancestors and all of that as Chinese. But I think that project has made a serious error. It ended up being a project of a whole society reimagining itself as ethnic Chinese only.
Hong Kong made its first step towards tackling racism in 2009 when it made the Race Discrimination Ordinance, but it didn't come without flaws. Fermi Wong has been advocating for ethnic minority rights since 1998.
The ordinance does not fully bound the government, especially in the government's power and function. For example, the school places allocation policy. Of course, this is the government function. Another one example is that the police, when they are performing their duty, exercise their power if they have any acts against FMRTs, and the law cannot do anything.
Margaret Ng was the chairperson of the committee that wrote the ordinance. She explains why it's important for government activities to be bound by this law.
What one individual does in terms of discrimination is very small, but what a whole society does, and quite seamlessly and invisibly, by keeping the racial minorities out of public policy, then the damage to the racial minorities are very great.
Hong Kong has no law to protect people from religious discrimination. Many Sikhs have been treated differently because of their turbans. Kardar Singh says his son is one of them.
ਕਿ ਮਤਲਬ ਉਹ ਵੱਖਰੀਆਂ ਐਸੋਸੀਏਸ਼ਨਾਂ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਸਾਡਾ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਟਰਬਨ ਅਲਾਉਡ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਕੂਲ ਇਹ ਸਪੈਸੀਫਿਕ ਲਫ਼ਜ਼ ਕਿਹਾ ਟਰਬਨ ਦਾ ਹਾਂ 2 ਵਾਰੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਭੁਲੇਖਾ ਪਿਆ ਫਿਰ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਟਰਬਨ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਅਲਾਉਡ ਕਰਦੇ ਤੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪ ਸੋਚਣਾ ਪਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਐਡਮਿਸ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਪੱਗ ਵਾਲੇ ਜੇ ਐਕਸੈਪਟ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਤੇ ਆਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਅਲਾਉਡ ਨਹੀਂ ਨਾ ਹਾਂ
The college released a statement saying that they welcome applications from all children of the appropriate age and academic background, regardless of nationality, gender, religion, and socio-economic status. Jody-Lan Sikh Temple often hosts visits for local students. Gurmel Singh teaches them about Sikh culture.
So this is small, also have the big size. So it is kept. So I gave them lectures about the Sikhism background of our history and culture. I used to tell them about turban, the hair, what is the reason behind that. So after listening the lecture, at least they have some understanding about our appearance with the and meanings behind this that I will explain you.
I don't really have chance to in touch with them, but now is I can through this program I can talk to them and I try to understand their life.
Since the handover, it has become very important to be able to speak as well as read and write Cantonese.
ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਾਂਗਰਸ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਚਲੀ ਗਈ ਉਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਦਾ ਮਾਲੂਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਵੀ ਕਈ ਥਾਈਂ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਤਕਲੀਫਾਂ ਆਈਆਂ ਘਰ ਵੀ ਲੈਣ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਆ ਪੋਸਟ ਚੱਲ ਪਏ ਨੇ ਕੋਈ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬਿਜਲੀ ਦੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਬਿੱਲ ਜਾਂ ਹਸਪਤਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਦੋਂ ਗੋਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਸਾਰੇ ਚਾਈਨੀਜ਼ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੋਰਡਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਹਸਪਤਾਲਾਂ 'ਚ ਸਰਕਾਰੀ ਕਾਗਜ਼ਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਉਦੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਸਿਰਫ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਪਿਓਰ ਚਾਈਨੀਜ਼ ਕਰਤੀ ਉਹ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡੀ ਡਿਫੀਕਲਟੀ ਹੈ.
The inability to speak Cantonese or to even read and write it will present itself as a hurdle at each and every stage. From the moment you're moving from one education system or institution to the other, whether you're moving from kindergarten even to primary and then to secondary, it really impacts your prospects of entry into each institution at every level.
Within the law, it says that if the schools fail to provide any special arrangement in terms of in the education area, that for FMRT students is not unlawful. So there is no incentive for the schools to do better.
Hong Kong's current education system provides little support for ethnic minorities who struggle learning Cantonese.
If they don't speak in Cantonese or Chinese, I mean, of course they can live, but then, I mean, it's a very narrowed area. Only in their own cultural group, as a small community, they cannot really blend into the local Hong Kong society.
We need to develop a curriculum for ethnic minorities, which essentially is Chinese as a second language. Ethnic minorities do not have the facility at home to be able to speak with their parents Chinese, and that is a complete disadvantage. They cannot also be immersed in the education system, learning what mainstream Chinese people are learning.
Lam Woon Kwong is the chairman of the Equal Opportunities Commission.
If you don't give them this alternative, which is what is happening at the moment, they just don't have this alternative, then 99% of them fail this Chinese subject. And failing that, their graduation certificate will simply show that their Chinese is failed, without indicating that actually some of them would be able to manage a reasonable degree of Chinese.
A survey carried out by the Equal Opportunities Commission found that racism in Hong Kong is caused by lack of communication between groups.
This type of school create racial segregation effects because there's lack of Chinese language environment, learning a Chinese environment, and also there's no chance for the students to interact with the mainstream Chinese students. And then when they graduate, they know nothing about the local society.
Pooja Kapai, a law professor at Hong Kong University, has experienced this kind of segregation during her schooling in Hong Kong.
The basic premise, as far as I can understand in hindsight, was that we were going to hold the class back because our level of Chinese, or sort of our capacity to keep up with the curriculum, was far behind that of the local students, and therefore we were better off not learning Chinese with the rest of the group. This de facto segregation of pupils of non-Chinese descent and Chinese descent needs to be abolished. The school placement system that is currently in place and the admissions policy needs to be completely revamped, in fact, with a view to ensure that the communities are as mixed as possible. The classroom is basically a learning laboratory. It's where students learn about people, their differences, their abilities, and their commonalities.
They are part of us. They are here, the children are here, and we are going to grow up and to prosper together. So how much better would it be for us really to mix and to understand, and then eventually to accept each other?
The Dragon Boat Festival is a big date in the Chinese calendar. It's the perfect opportunity to get people talking. This year, a group of Hong Kong-born Indians has decided to take part. With more steps like this, Hong Kong will be on its way to becoming Asia's true world city.
A young Tunisian, a street vendor who was a really diligent and glad citizen, though some sad incidents turned him to a desperate and mad dissident. He was kicked and harassed on a daily basis by police officers who are mainly hated